Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the Aleut or Unangan Tunu presentation. So in the last presentation, we focused mainly on the syntax of the language, where things go, the pronouns, the phonetics, the Russian influence that was left behind in the language from colonialization, and we also, in this presentation, we had to split off the verb section because the verbs have a lot of information, and this being an agglutinative language, verbs are going to work a lot differently in this language, so it was best to have its own thing. I've also decided to leave out the dialect comparisons in this particular presentation because the dialects are far enough to where you could probably understand somebody on your nearby islands, but once you start going further away, you're going to really need to learn some differences, or you'll have to see if your local population on your nearby ones know anything about it. You really need to be able to know what is in each dialect in order to really be able to make that comparison. And they're different enough to where I really need some more time to look into that. So I can make a future video on that later, but this is going to mainly focus on the verbal system of the language. So on to the verbs now. These are some of the features of Aleut verbs, and like many languages, like Polynesian languages and a recent presentation I did, there are a lot of languages have moods. So obviously tense is a very common thing, but not all languages have moods. Aleut is pretty big in the moods. There's also general forms, and then there's extra time concepts that we kind of have to wrap our heads around in Aleut. They're not hard to understand, but they're different from English or European languages. There is an imperative. They had a historical imperative that had more of a intentional meaning to it, but that's no longer used, and that was only used in, I believe, 1 or 2 different dialects. And then they have this form called the anterior, which is quite interesting. Again, not too difficult to understand. And then you have conditional, which we're not covering in this. And then you have, this kind of reminds me of an Arabic, but English has it too, where you can kind of take the verb and nominalize it, turn it into some kind of noun. This language also does that as well. And then you've got the recent past, you've got remote, you have optative, and then you have the intentional and gerundive, which I'll dive more into as we get to those sections. And then we have the dubitative, which does actually deal with doubt. And if you see that in the roots, you can tell that it has to do something with doubt. So let's go ahead and move on to verb tenses now. So in this section, we're going to talk about the remote time, recent past tense, and obviously present tense. You could add general tense to this as well, but general tense you just don't mark anything on there. There's just some things that you have to consider about it, but we're not really going to talk about that in this presentation. The present tense, and we're also going to drop a little bit of information about the negative as well. This is mainly done with the suffix ikuch, or in the negative lakach. The way that Aleut works, and most likely Yupik, Inuit, and quote-unquote Eskimo, because I believe that actually is the name of a language. In this large language family, the way that a lot of these suffixes work is that, at least in the Aleut language, is that you have a root like ku. This guttural sound changes to a different sound that in that language's rules appropriate to connect to another particle, and that next particle the beginning consonant may have to change depending on what the last thing here was. So the G with a circumflex over it is something like French's or Arabic's Rhin sounds somewhere over there. Then they put this la in front of it. So you'll see that a lot. There are different suffix forms. You really do have to memorize a lot of these forms because these forms change according to person. There are some things that are similar, like you might notice that there's a G at the end for the first person, or the third person is the base form, or the second person may end in an N. However, there are other suffixes in which the first person or the second person, not the dual or the plural, but the singular I'm talking about here, those forms may use different letters at the end. So it can get a little bit complicated, so we're not going to really go into that. The last presentation had some examples of these varying different forms. So in here we have the example ashaku, he or it died. And then if you want to turn that into a negative, in some dialects, depending on what the end of this is, you would remove a T and change it to a different letter, or just drop it all together. But in this example, because it ends in a vowel, we could just simply put lakach, did not die. He, she, or it did not die. And then ayugiku could be he or she went out, and then ayugalaka, he did not go. This example here, this first noun here means man. And then you have this huh that comes after that. That is an object marker. Sometimes that could be translated roughly as the, and sometimes it can also end in an M, which is more, it's very similar to the nun in Korean or the wa in Japanese, where you're marking the topic of a sentence, the main subject of a sentence or the main idea. However, the huh is, from my current observation, it appears to be more of an object form or something like the. And then in this example here, in the Atkin dialect, as compared to the Eastern dialect, in the Eastern dialect, as we saw earlier, you can say asha lakach, did not die. You could assume that there was a T there before, and then that T got deleted before that L. In Atkin, you would keep this T. In Eastern, you got rid of it. So you see this a lot in different suffixes. On Alaska, 200 years ago, or one of those islands, ports. The present tense. So the present tense is the most colorful tense. It has a concept called and fork. It's a little bit more difficult to understand, but it basically deals with references that are around you. Ula means house, and kuhama means white. So again, you have this ha after the house, which is basically the definite article referring to that house. So kuhma here can mean white. To be white would be the verb form for that. After kuhma, you have ku. Ku is the present tense, and then after that you have huh. They used the SG, which I assume is singular, to refer to the purpose of that huh after the ku. The ku is the present tense, so it's saying that the house is white right now. This is supposed to be tagada. It's supposed to be tagada lakach. So tagada means new. Lakach is not. See, and this is why whenever you're trying to switch between languages where you have spaces to represent the boundaries between words and expressions, and in these languages where everything is put into one large long string, you have to dig these out. And the only way you can do that is through experience. You have to spend a lot of time with these particles and understand how they change and evolve in different contexts. And then the next example, my father is sleeping. So ada is father, and then this le is a pronoun, a possessive pronoun ending meaning my, or the first person singular. So my father, and then sa, sleep. Again, you're doing this ku. So basically, if you have you're referring to a specific object or person, most of the time you're gonna use ku at the end of the verb, and then you'll use lakach. So for example below, vira, ha. The ha in this sentence, you can't say the vira, but ha, it's referring to vira here. And then hila means to read, and then lakach, vira is not reading at this moment. But in the example sentence that Bergson gave, he indicated that it had the meaning of she's doing something else instead rather than read. I don't know what most of these mean. I didn't have a dictionary in front of me. The ku is obviously the present tense here, and then the kling is an ending specifically for ku. There's other endings here, but kling is one of them. And this is what I mean by these suffixes get wild. You will have to memorize a lot of different suffixes. It can get very frustrating, which is why we really need to find a way to produce more resources for these languages so that they're easier to learn. In the next example here, this is an example of an anaphoric reference. He took it right now. So I don't know what it specifically refers to, Petra, but this is an example of the that I showed earlier, which is like a topic marker. It's not a topic marker, but that's the closest, that's how I'm able to understand it. And this can actually be used to ask a question. Uku means find. Ku means in this way means did, and that would be the particle that's creating a question here. And then did you now just find it? That helps to form that question. That helps to make it more like a question when you form it in that order. And the recent past. So lahana or sarana refers to some event that happened earlier in the day, and I'm talking about when the speaker is referring to that. So it could be earlier that day, or it could be the day before. It could be 8 o'clock today. You could refer to an event that happened at 3 p.m. or something that happened that morning, or something that happened even yesterday morning. I like to say like a 36-hour, if it happened within the past 36 hours, because 36 hours is like, no matter what you're doing, you'll most likely be able to go all the way back to when you woke up the day before within a 36-hour period. So that's just a rule that I created. It's not an actual official rule. It's just helps me to understand this recent past concept here. So the first example here, and I'm sorry for this dark blue, it looked better on laptop I was working on here. So qilam means this morning. Last night is angakingan. Qilam wa, so wa means to enter or to come into a place, and then lagana meaning the past, and you have this word qilam just to reinforce that meaning, ha, which is that ending that you would add to the end of tense marker. And then the next example, it could be a borrowing from Russian sunya, which I believe is a dream son. I'm not 100% sure if that's from Russian. If that's the case, it would just mean I was dreaming. And then the last night meaning would be attributed to the sahana. And then the king, that's again a ending that you can use for I with this type of suffix. And then the remote tense. So the remote tense has two different suffixes. So you have na, and then you have reka. These two different suffixes have different times for when they're used, and they have their own edge cases. But they both generally refer to an action that happened outside of that 36-hour day before time frame. So reka can, if whenever it doesn't have any subject marker, no verb with a h at the end, no verb with a m at the end, it's just a simple clause. There's no anaphoric reference to anything, and it's just like that. That can be Aleut's way of expressing a passive state, meaning it was done, as opposed to I did something, it was done. Ukul means fine, and there's this we'll see later in this presentation, ukul, and then kaga, gaka. That's one of the endings that you can use with this whenever you see all the different forms for the first, second, third person, the singular, the dual, and the plural. Like I said, it gets really wild. I didn't want to intimidate people here, so I didn't share it here, but there's a different chart for every single suffix. You can find that in Berglund's book. He puts those forms everywhere where he talks about the different suffixes. You can see how much memorization is required to really know it. And then you have ting kidul gaka, I was helped. So the ting, that means I, and then kidu means to help. And then again, there's that that you see after the uku, the same after kidu. Again, I believe we'll see that later. And then gaka was helped. That's an interesting side use of this particle. And then whenever the remote tense is used in the final position of some clause, it just refers to the past. So it can just refer to something that happened, it's done, and you're just referring to it now. Hla means boy, and mum and is that topic particle ending I was talking about earlier. You add that. I'm not 100% what on is here. Another particle could have a dative meaning to something or for something. I'm not 100% sure about that. So ka is a fish, and then the ha has that indefinite meaning. That means to give, and I believe that it's a little longer, but it's combining with this ra. And then you have na, which is the other ka. So either ka or na. And then you have na, and then in the first one you have the Peter, Petra, so he's the main subject of sentence. And then I'm not sure what wararan is, but what I can tell you is that the again, the is will, and then you see that na again, and then you have the because it's the first person. So the first person you saw that was a so arnach, and then in the third person it changes to arnach. So verbal nouns, this is done with lich or sich. That example I was showing you earlier, you can use that after the stem. So you saw ting kidul. So kidu means to help. So you put that L after. So it must have been either atkin or atuin. And then in the negative form, you say lakan. So it's like, how do you get lakan? It's like, with the other one, it's like you have kuk lakach. That's not so far, but lich, sich, lakan. So you see what I'm trying to say here? The negative form is different. And then you have a whole chart you have to memorize for lich and sich now. It's a really cool language, kind of addictive if you ask me. I really like this language. And then, so the first example here, you have ascha. Ascha means to pass away. However, when you put lich at the end, it means dying, the act of dying. And then ascha, lakan, not dying. And then here, ayu means to go out, or ayuch. And then you have ayuch sich. So this h could be added to ayu, because I've seen ayu without the h, I believe. That h could go there because maybe it sounds good to put before the s. the main reason why a lot of these sounds change at the end and at the beginning of different particles when they're attached to other particles. So ayuksik going out, ayukhrakan not going out. So again, this h is changing to a, I'm not sure if it's a 100% sure if it's a g or a r. I'm doing my best here with it, but that's an example of that, of how ayu has to change, because now the L is now the following letter of the word, so it has to change. And you have this s, which is the following letter after h. So because it's changing like that, you have to consider different rules for how you're going to end it and what sounds are going to change it. Not vowel harmony. This would be more like consonant harmony. And then the next example, this can also be used in a present progressive tense, or rather an ongoing activity. So uyu means brother. Is the first person possessive suffix, my brother. And then tahin is the second person object form. Then you have ka, which means to eat, and then you have la, which is it's an emphasis marker. And then you have on, which is a first person singular. Then you've got aka, which is to come. And then that that you have at the end there, I didn't quite get that well with the, I did actually. It's just hard to see here on the small screen. And then you have that in this context, it has a present progressive meaning. And then you put ting at the end, which of course is the first person singular, as you've seen. So this means, well, my brother, I have come to eat you. Sorry for the morbid example. It's just, that was one of the only examples they gave for this particular concept. And historically, at least in some dialects, it has been documented to be used during the act of bidding someone a farewell. So if someone leaves and you have a different greeting or a different wish that you're telling them, then you would use this form as well. So in this example, hakah come again. So in this example, you can see here that you're putting the h after again because you're wishing it to one particular singular individual. So aka means to come, but this h that they put at the front, that could be a dialectal thing. I'm not 100% sure, but as far as like to come into a place is concerned, aka is how you say that. And they're also using this h at the end of it as well, which I'm not sure. I don't even know what the li is. It could also just be double. It could be just duplication, who knows. And then the second one, you have ukudiga. Ukudiga. So the li here again is the li historical meaning of bidding someone a farewell. You live well, and they're leaving. So now on to the verb moods. So in this section, we're going to talk about the optative, the gerundive, and the intentional. These are the three main verb moods that set the Aleut language apart from some other languages that have verb forms, although the optative is a little bit more common. So the optative mood, the suffix used for this mood usually will come after a vowel followed by khata. However, ta is the suffix by itself that carries this meaning. And then depending on what the following suffix is, you may use this t or not. So this is used when you want to make a wish, put a place a command or an order. Compared to the general imperative, tends to be a lot stronger, and it can come off as rude depending on the context. It is a stronger way to issue a command or an order. So in the first example here, we have this one, as I was saying earlier. I'm assuming the haka is a variant of aka, meaning come, and then this oct now makes that command a little bit stronger. And then same, his go out, hisacht go out, and that's a historical way to say it. Now it's hiticht, go out now. And the Akin, specifically the Akin dialect, it uses the second person dual form of the optative mood for its imperatives. And those imperatives tend to be more polite. So for example, qa means to eat, khut is that optative mood marker, and then chichech, so please, hichech, so please eat. And the same here, qat, eat now, which is what, it's just, that right there is just simply the stem plus the optative mood marker directly. And then the intentional mood, so this, as it says, marks intention. So usually this is used whenever the speaker has declared that they're going to do something. They've decided they have the intention to do something. So that's what it's used for mainly. And whenever it's used in the final position of a clause, it can be used to ask for the person who you're addressing's permission or their intention. So, for example, su means take. This makes it a may I, and then on is I, and e is it's an interrogative. So may I take it? And then ting kidungan, I'll help you. Are you going out? Are you tamis? Are you going out in your boat? So in this example, you're actually asking the speaker for their intention. So when you're using the second form, tamis, asking if they're going to be going out in their boat. And then these other examples like ting kinungan, you're going to help them. When it's used in a position that's not a final position, it can express intention, purpose, or motive, as directly quoted by Bergsland. So awa means to work. Ang is that intentional mood marker, and then on is I have to, and then mata means that you have to, or that you're supposed to do something. I have to work. And then the gerundive mood. So usually when you hear gerundive, if you're familiar with a lot of grammar terms, this usually indicates the ing, that present progressive happening right now marker. However, in this language, it indicates something that is bound to happen, or something that it happens in general, right? Or as the author of the grammar says, an anticipated fact. In this example, drink your tea before it gets cold. This is something that's going to happen if you don't drink your tea. It's going to cool down from being hot. And then the same before Yusula gets up. You assume Yusula is sleeping right now, she's gonna get up. Kadan means before. This aran means it's combining with it somehow, so I'm assuming there's a meaning behind that. Anyway, so on to these are other verb forms. They are not moods. They may possibly be moods, but I don't think they are. They just seem to be different forms of the verbs. So the anterior form, marked by yang, this is marked in the locative case. It points to an action that happened at some time in the speaker's life, right? So Anan, his mother, Asha, pass away, Angan, when. So when his mother passed away. This kind of can carry the meaning of when something blah blah. When something happened. So that's a meaning that seems to be translated a lot with this particular root. And then wakun tusa. Tus is to hear, and among having heard this. So I assume the disciples is waku, but it could also mean this. So I'm not 100% on that one. And then the next example just means when I fell. So is means to fall, and aming when I fall. And then the dubitive form. This is used with you're wondering what the result of something is going to be, right? So you got to ask to figure it out. You don't know what the response is going to be. You're expecting something, you don't know what's going to happen. Somebody ignores it. You doubt anything's coming of it. So I assume that's why they call this the dubitative form. And this is marked with yakta. And tahin, you, sasuliti, to bother, ichta, do I, that it will make this a doubt, like, you're asking them, you're wondering if you're bothering them or something, you got that doubt, right? And then use with verbs dealing with asking, expecting, or ignoring. So here, the man asked me if I had taken it. The man, the here, su, to take, chata. So chata and ang, if I had. So this chata is what is being put into this dubitative form. I'm not sure why it's being used 3 times, and it could also be getting mixed up with this other, but that's like chatat. This is just chata. So it's being used so many times here. I'm assuming if this is really just emphasizing the use. I'm not really sure here, but su chatang, if I had taken it, and then afmaya achtaran. So afmaya is to ask. So I guess when they asked, they were wondering, and then if you had taken it, something that you were wondering about, and then achtaku, I'm not sure why achtanku's here. So I can't explain that part, but that's that form. So on to the games now. So game number 1, or rather the first line of the game. So these are 2 random sentences. In these sentences, if you don't speak Russian, it's going to be a lot more difficult. But if you do speak Russian, you should be able to pick out which one it is. So in this one, all of these words are Aleut words except one of them, right? If you're familiar with Russian, the ka ending is typically used for the diminutive, meaning that it makes something smaller, quote unquote, cuter, more sweeter, something like that. So in this sentence, if you guessed C, lavkim, you're correct. This comes from the Russian word for a store. And I believe it means shop, like a smaller store. But in Aleut, it can refer to just a store, I believe. And then the second example, so if you're familiar with Russian, or if you've studied various Indo-European languages, you may recognize one of the words in this sentence already. And so if you guessed B, vino, you're correct. That means wine. And so in this example, the second slide here, what does the word babushka mean? If you guess grandma, that's not correct. It looks like the word for grandma, but they actually have an Aleut word for grandma. This actually means midwife. And number 2, this one should be not too difficult. Kufya. If you guessed coffee for this, then you're correct. What does lavkach or lavkich mean? So this has a variant root. If you guessed lava, I'm sorry, that's not correct, even though it looks like that. A warehouse, that's also not correct. So if you guessed a store, if you were paying attention from the last slide, you'll know that's a store. In the fourth question, now if you speak German or even Russian, then this one should come to you pretty easily. What does kartoffelach mean? Or if you take the ch off, what's kartoffela? Is it a sweet potato? Is it? It could be a turnip. I think it could be a turnip. I'm kidding. It's not a turnip. It's a potato. Kartoffel. So this is the book that I used. So I will put that in the description below in case anybody wants to take a closer look at this book and learn some Aleut for themselves. And again, Slach Yizeek Malaga Kuch Kara Sakum. Thank you, everybody.